Welcome to my stock photo of a den. In this little box here, I note that I'm a game designer, but I haven't touched on that a ton here. I'm going to change that today because I want to share my thoughts around the design of a game I made which came out late last year, Aetherspire. Even though board games exist in three-dimensional space, only a slim subset of games really utilize that space. So when you have something on the table that uses the z-axis, that's going to turn heads. Make that z-axis matter, and that's really cool. A lot of games that lift off the table fall in three camps. Dexterity games, where gravity is the biggest opponent. Think Jenga, Kerplunk, Quaggle. That's what most people think of when they see a game with elevated components. Absolutely uses flair. The Everdell tree, the Camel-Up pop-up trees, these might look cool on the table, but don't have any impact on gameplay. And a few rare, non-dexterity strategy games that actually use the 3D aspect as part of gameplay. Some notable ones include Torres, Kaluva, and Upwards. The latter category was an interesting one, so relatively unexplored. When I got inspiration from my friend and fellow designer Jason to make a game where cards are propped up on dice to represent a structure, that's what I wanted to focus on. I went through many iterations of a cooperative game where you build levels of a shared central structure. In early versions, invaders had their own tracks off the board that would slowly lead them toward your fortress, and your fortress would have weapons that would destroy them en route. Eventually, I got rid of those tracks entirely and made invaders enter the fortress directly. And that was a good move toward focusing on the fun. The fun was on the 3D building, with the managing of tracks of invaders tangential. Over and over during the course of the game's development, I kept falling into a trap, adding some new feature or mechanism, and then realizing that it was moving away from the unique hook of the game. I made this cool system of a rotating spellbook, which was a distraction. I made this cool system where you could cover up numbers in your own personal special ability with dice to change its effect, rather than using them for building. Distraction. I had characters move around the floors of the building to perform the building and attacking actions. And again, another distraction. One point of discussion that the publisher and I had was about how this building hook actually took physical form. For most of the game's development, the tower was built using D6s as a structural support element. You could place dice as pillars on spaces matching the number restrictions printed on the card or tile. It required the box to contain 40 or 50 six-sided dice, which was heavy and expensive. But I was adamant on keeping that. I felt it was so integral to the game's design that even though multiple potential publishers passed on it, at least partially due to that expense, I wanted it to stay. Eventually, Phase Shift Games signed my game since it fits their lineup of exploring the new dimensions of gaming. It was still using the D6s for a while, but after working with them for a long time on the development cycle, both members of their team felt that it was not just more cost-effective to change the dice structure element, but cooler as well. Custom D8s with the elements printed on them. I fought it. At first, after some changes, I begrudgingly accepted the change. Then I learned to love it. It actually ended up working really well. And the elemental connection between the dice and the floors felt really good and immediate for the players. Plus, the dice look great and the chunky pillars are a hit. Phase Shift made a fantastic physical production out of this, and I adore the Vic Corbella illustrations. He nailed a cute but intense vibe for the characters, enemies, box cover, and floor tiles. Colorful and intense and fun all over. Every bit of artwork that came in, I was floored with its high quality. And holding the real deal after so many hand-sliced cardboard and the Game Crafter print-on-demand prototypes with my quick and dirty work was such an amazing feeling. That's a feeling that just does not get old for me. and getting to show it to people at conventions is such a treat. It's not my first published game, but it's my first that wasn't print on demand, and that I've gotten to demo at cons. If you're at Gen Con or PAX Unplugged this year, come on over to Phase Shift booth and I'll demo Aetherspire for you. Actual cooperation was the part that I struggled most with. I'm pretty picky with cooperative games. Perhaps you picked up on this during my History of Cooperative Games videos, but I really struggle with co-ops that can be quarterbacked. So I tried many forms of the game that were unquarterbackable. I tried a few versions with different roles. One person managing dice, one person managing rooms, one person managing invaders, and so on. That was overcomplicated. It made teaching and learning painful, and it didn't let most people interact with the structure directly. I tried timed simultaneous play. It had all of the above problems, plus some unneeded stress. I tried communication limits that felt artificially tacked on. All of this was distracting from the core of the game. It's about building up in clever ways, first and foremost. And I was making the core of the game managing mana and spells before anything else. So, against my instincts, against my preferences, I made a game that is possible to quarterback. I was ready for the backlash during playtests, and that backlash never came. Even though you don't interact with the game mechanically on others' turns, people reported feeling engaged, making suggestions on other people's turns, talking through the longer-term strategy, debating tactical decisions. The game is somewhat complex, medium weight I'd say, although that term is incredibly subjective. But it allows for people to discuss and strategize out of turn. In the game's final form, in a 4-player Aetherspire session, it's possible that some players only get 3 or so active turns during the full game. But playtesters never responded negatively to that when asked. They felt so engaged on everyone's turn that it was okay when they weren't the one person using their powers all the time. So, despite all my fears, despite what I tend toward as a player, this completely open communication framework actually worked out great. It also made it very easy to make a solo mode. Again, something I rarely engage in except during playtesting. But with nothing hidden between players and as a puzzle that only one person actually directly engages with at a time, it was a very straightforward shift. In Aetherspire's development cycle, I tried 3 types of characters. The shortest lived type was role-based, like I mentioned a few minutes ago. One person must be the character who performs the room fetching action. One person must be the character who attacks the invaders, and so on. In a game with fewer players than roles, there were combination characters that performed 2 or 3 roles. This is the model seen in some games like Space Cadets. Besides the other issues I mentioned, this didn't bring a lot of play-to-play variety. The same capabilities are always present. Not a problem, really, but it was untapped potential for a game like this. The second type, the one that I eventually settled on, was similar to what you'll see in Matt Leacock games like Pandemic and the Forbidden series. Characters have the same basic capabilities as each other, but will have some extra action choices or other benefits. In Aetherspire as published, everyone has access to most of the same actions: placing pillars, placing floor tiles, casting spells, and a few others. Each character has a name and a personality, with a set of 3 actions, or 4 in solo mode, unique to them. None of them essential to the game flow, but giving them new capabilities, new ways to deal with the incoming threats, new ways to place pillars, the ability to manipulate dice, special effects for casting certain spells. A game will play differently based on what mix of characters is in the game. The third type of character I tried, which was interesting but a bit trickier, involved multi-part characters that would have mix and match aspects. This was an extension of the single character framework that I just mentioned as number 2, but your unique character would have at least 3 cards: a name, some number of adjectives, and a role, like Autumn, the powerful, perceptive destroyer. Each individual card contributed to the number of dice you could play each turn and provided an ability on top of the standard set. The goal was that each card would be roughly balanced with more dice on cards with weaker abilities. You could also level up from certain game actions to give you extra adjectives. This method was fine, but not worth the added overhead compared to where I landed. I was able to just create characters based on pre-decided sets of these abilities and combine them onto a single card. A little artifact of that method still lives in the way the published characters are titled, like Dawn the Chronomancer and Eve the Battle Mage. So how did I balance these characters in the end? Well, I did take careful notes of playtesting sessions, both solo and multiplayer, to make sure that characters had abilities that were worthwhile without being dominant. Working out how much of this win or loss was based on the characters they had versus how well the humans played versus the randomness present in the system versus any systematic changes that I've made in this point of game development. If this were a competitive game, I would care a lot more about fine-tuning this sort of balance, making it so there weren't any characters that were a little bit or a lot better than the others over the long haul. I'd spend a lot more effort working out, stripping away the external factors, normalizing player experience, but I didn't strive for that level here. I was happy to have a bit of a rougher sense of balance. I, in balancing, assigned some numerical values to how strong it is to be drawing tiles, destroying invaders, crystallizing invaders, drawing shards, rolling dice, and so on, to make sure that they were about on equal terms, and to try to limit the number of scenarios where a player had no good options on their turn. In my opinion, the characters ended up mostly balanced. In all honesty, I think in the published version, there is one character that's slightly more effective than the others, and one that's slightly less effective, but only marginally. To me, as long as I think they're about equal, and as long as other people think that they're about equal, and they're all fun to play, then I'm happy. For one, as much as I think Aetherspire is a fantastic game that rewards multiple plays, I don't expect 90% of individuals to play it more than half a dozen times. That's the case I would expect with any modern strategy game. So the random average person won't know whether, say, playing as Glenn the Slicer makes it more or less likely that you'll win the game. As long as it doesn't feel to a group that one player had a worse time because of the characters that were there, I'm happy. If over time a group finds that a character is out of line with the others, it's not catastrophic. Different groups will handle it differently. Maybe people will want to pick a weak character more as an extra challenge, or maybe they'll pick a strong one more to increase their chance of winnings. Maybe they'll house rule something, which I'm totally in support of. There are 15 heroes in this game, so people will think of them differently. I don't think any of these are really bad outcomes, and I'm quite confident that the variance between the characters isn't at that level. But absolute worst case, if someone finds an actually broken set of characters or some degenerate strategy I missed, a group could ban that combo, or potentially if there's ever an expansion for this, we can put in new versions of the characters or some other fix. I don't ever foresee that happening with Aetherspire needing some kind of a balance fix, but I'm just noting that even if that did happen, it's not a big deal. The other way I gave Aetherspire variety is in the various difficulty modes. It's tough when I've been deep in the design of a game, figuring out what fair balance is and how much help new players need. I was also scared of a too tough first scenario turning off reviewers. This is a game where if you make some bad decisions, you can cut yourself off from victory early. So I was able to split out an easier setup with simpler characters and a few things on the board to start that simulate having had an extra turn, and call that level 1. Level 2 is what I consider the normal way to play, which allows all characters and all enemies, and you don't start with anything on the board. I also added a later final extra challenge mode that I don't expect many people will actually play at all. I have seen some reviewers look at it. But when I was solo testing this, I appreciated giving myself this extra challenge and requirement. I'm hoping that other people find this final level, giving the game more shelf life if they just want to keep playing it over and over. And I hope that those people do enjoy that. I'm putting this video out just before Gen Con 2026, which will be the second convention where people can buy Aetherspire. I have loved the reception it's gotten so far, and I would love for it to catch the general audience's attention and imagination in a big way. I've seen in playtesting and in demos that the table presence turns heads. The game has great artwork, a vibrant cover with distinct characters. The gameplay is engaging, it has replayability of all the different characters, enemies, challenge modes. The reviews that have come in have been largely positive, although mostly from pretty small outlets. I don't envision Aetherspire becoming the next Ticket to Ride, but I'm hoping that it eventually finds its audience and the groups that want a challenging, replayable, vibrant cooperative game. Check it out at a convention or on the All Play website, and if you see me there, tell me that you saw me here in the stock photo of the den.